Hello there, my name's Brandon and I make pictures out of tiny squares. And today I want to try making some pixel art of Fox McCloud, who's a character we've seen a lot in 3D form, but not so much as a 2D sprite design. I'm going to create 3 interpretations to explore what his design might look like across different styles and eras of pixel art. So let's get right into it. With Star Fox being a Nintendo property, I thought it'd be appropriate to start by reimagining Fox McCloud in the style of a run-and-gun platforming game for the original NES console. Something along the lines of Mega Man or anything similar to that. For stylistic references, I was thinking about other sorts of anthropomorphic characters, and remembered the nice sprite work of both Scrooge McDuck and Darkwing Duck, so I've got those two off to the side there just for aesthetic inspiration. I've approached this one by starting off with a rough silhouette, and then I'm erasing from within that and trying to figure out the detailing with just the black line work alone before adding color. And the key thing I'm looking for here is just to have a good readability for the face, because proportionally these kinds of cartoony designs tend to allocate a lot of space for the head, so it's obviously pretty important that it's quite readable. So that readability here is about making sure that the line work of the eyes, the nose, and the mouth are all pretty clear and sort of separate from each other. And then beyond that, I'm just, tacking on other notable character features like the ears, the scarf, and the triangular belt buckle. For the coloring, I'm using the NES palette, which has a total of around 56 colors, but each sprite can only use up to 4. And if there needs to be transparent space, like having a character sprite move in front of a background, that only leaves 3 actual colors per sprite. However, often they'd push the visible color count higher by overlaying multiple sprites to kind of build up one character, which is how Scrooge McDuck over there, for example, has a total of 5 colors and transparency. So I'm going to take similar liberties here, and I'm using 5 colors total because it sort of felt like the minimum that was necessary to represent Fox McCloud's main color scheme. Final thing, of course, was to add the tail. And I'd like to tell you that I was just leaving it till the main part of the sprite was finalized, but I genuinely just overlooked it until this point. I think because I was mainly referencing this photo where it's not that visible. Still unforgivable, but either way I've got it there now, so let's go ahead and take a look at the finalized NES Sprite. Alright, and for some more context, here he is with a few other NES sprites. This one turned out to be a really nice warm-up for me, but let's go ahead and make things more interesting and move on now from 8-bit into the 16-bit era. For the 16-bit Super Nintendo style, my go-to would tend to be along the lines of Mega Man X or something, but this time I wanted to try something a bit different, and as you can see I've got some reference sprites from Donkey Kong Country for inspiration. Now, the interesting thing about the sprites from that game is that they were pre-rendered as 3D models and then converted into sprite work. And you can tell that even though they're pixelated, they still have that 3D quality about them, and definitely one of the more unique looks from the games of that era. What becomes difficult when trying to approximate something similar to this is I'm just doing this by a sort of manual workflow, so it doesn't seem entirely likely to capture the exact look. But I figured at least making the attempt would be a bit of a novelty and be sure to land me in an interesting spot either way. What I've done to get this going is a typical workflow for me, where I've been creating a silhouette as I go, and then carving out the finer details, which has left these little pockets that I'll render the actual shading and highlights into. And to do that contouring, I've given myself this range of grayscale values to work with. And these ones were actually just sourced by viewing the Donkey Kong sprite in grayscale. And that kind of makes it easier to see the way that the various steps of brightness look across the sprite. So the way that I'm applying these tones is to start from a flat shade of gray and then step through a few levels of brightness up to a highlight. Sometimes these steps are pretty evenly distributed in terms of the sizes of the patches, and other times there would be sort of 2 larger patches of brightness that get connected by a smaller transitionary bit of in-between tone pixels. This whole process looks a tad chaotic, but I just kept building things up in laps and trying to find some cohesion in the rendering across the entire sprite. Now to take this and add some color, I've created a new layer and set it to the color blending mode. And when you paint on that one, it just colors in the grayscale underneath it, and it still retains all the same value as far as how bright or dark everything appears. So in lieu of any other color palettes to go from, I've just taken the colors from the NES Sprite and started from those. Typically when I'm doing this color workflow, I'll spend some time shifting things around with the hue sliders and dialing in better tones anyway. So really the main thing is just that it helps to get something on the board and then kind of see how you can work with it after that. The downside though, this method has introduced sort of an excessive amount of colors. There's certainly a lot of redundant colors going on here. So I wanted to find a simple way to rein those in. And I'm going to use the posterize adjustment layer to do that. What this does is it restricts the number of color steps for each of the red, green, and blue channels. So when it's set to 2, that's going to be a max of 2 colors per RGB. When increasing the levels, we'll continue to see more colors getting introduced. And obviously at a certain point, sliding the scale too far is just going to bring things back to the original colors anyway. The setting I really liked was at a value of 6, which introduced this neat little step of pink and purple pixels, giving almost this like iridescent look to some of the detailing here. From this result, I did a bit more color balancing to give the final sprite. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. In the end, although I don't think it's too obvious that it was initially inspired by the Donkey Kong style, I feel like it turned out to be a pretty cool looking sprite in its own right. And I suppose in a way, using something like the posterize effect still did introduce kind of that external factor into the workflow, not unlike what would be the case when converting a 3D model into a limited pixel art palette. But let's move on from here into one last style. Okay, so I know the PlayStation is mainly known for 3D graphics, but it also had several games that incorporated 2D pixel art sprite work into them. And one of my favorites out of that bunch is Breath of Fire 4. So I'm going to use that as my stylistic inspiration for the last sprite design. I always wonder if the pixel art in PlayStation 1 games is so good due to a lot of the same artists perhaps having progressed through the 8-bit and 16-bit eras and, honing their skills up to that point. On top of improved technical specs of the console, of course. Either way, here we are trying to do the Breath of Fire 4 influenced design, and you might be able to tell that this game is set in a slightly overhead isometric perspective, which is why most characters' feet are oriented like that. As per usual, I'm starting this one as a silhouette, but then rather than carving out too many details from the line work, I wanted to try dropping patches of color right over top of the silhouette to find the design that way. The art in this game has this soft touch to it, and a good bit of that results from the colors using fairly low to moderate saturation and brightness. But it's also in the way that they're applied in clusters on the sprite with minimal line work or with colored outlines. The palette that I've got off to the side here was sourced from a few of those character sprites, and I'm just trying to find combinations that work for the costuming of Fox McCloud. Unlike the Super Nintendo sprite that we just covered, I didn't want to use too many steps of color, because having too many bands of color can tend to look pretty noisy, and this needs to be much softer than that. On top of the color count though, I'm trying to keep it softer by reducing the number of individual pixels that I leave kind of sitting there on their own. And by that I mean I'm trying to connect up little sections of pixels together to form these small clusters. And those little patches give a softer feel overall than the kind of checkerboarding that you can feel when there are too many isolated pixels. I guess in a way it's sort of like having a bunch of miniature areas of visual rest, and they all kind of add up and yield a smoother appearance. The last addition here, once again, is the tail. I don't like how this is becoming a habit now, but with getting that pinned on now, let's go ahead and take a look at the final sprite. Alright, so there's our more mature, battle-hardened interpretation of Fox, looking like he'd make an interesting addition to the cast as well. I think he's actually my favorite sprite of the bunch today. I really love the Breath of Fire 4 style, and it was fun to give that one a try for once. But even so, it was really just pleasing to take a little trip through a few different styles today. And we'll close out with some CRT time to see what they look like on there. And by the way, I've recently rearranged my office, so this whole wide shot of the TV looks a little different now. But yeah, thank you for watching, and take care and keep it square.